Okay, Leonora Puma on the 17th of July 2019. We're talking about your uh, grandparents and their experiences, your uncle in Iowa, or uncle or grandfather in Iowa,
Grandfather.
coming to Chicago.
Grandfather and
Grand,
family. My
grand,
grandfather, Michael LaPuma, and his wife and family.
okay, coming to Chicago in about 1922 after auctioning off their farm.
Correct. And then they settled in the south side around Trumbull, where St. Gall's Avenue, where St. Gall's Church is.
Mm-hmm.
And his children went to public school there. And then, and like I said, well, very important about educating their children and all. And then my mother was in the more Italian neighborhood there where St. Precious Blood School is, and she went to Precious Blood School and started there. And actually started her love of music while she was in grade school, taking piano lessons.
Okay, now how did your parents meet?
Well, they knew the families were from the same towns and whatever, and somehow through relatives and getting together, they all met up. Uh, and
So they
my
sort of married within the
Yeah, they knew each other.
Paisani
Yeah,
group.
correct. My father was an engineer with Zenith Radio, and my mother was already at 18 had her vocal career going with her debut at the Civic Opera House and stuff. And then they got married, and lived with my grandparents on Adams Street actually for a while, and then eventually, a year after my birth, bought the house next door.
Okay, well, let's go back and tell me more about your mother and her uh, uh, musical career, the beginnings of her musical career.
Well, as I said, my mother started taking piano lessons from when she was in Precious Blood School, and she went to Siena High School, and the nuns encouraged her and told my grandfather that she felt education was the most important thing, and to encourage her with her music and everything, which he did. At the age of 16, she was already playing the organ for the Scalabrinian priests as they were raising money to build Mother Cabrini Church. And
Now, was she in the neighborhood near Mother Cabrini Church? Or?
they were still living at that point in the Italian, I can't remember the name of the street, but in that little enclave area.
Near Grand Avenue?
No, the southern one. I'll get the address for you.
Okay, we can fill that in.
Yeah. So anyway, that's where they met, and then well, my parents had already moved. Though. They moved to the Adams Street when she must have been in high school when they moved to Adams Street. My grandmother and grandfather and my mother, in the two flat. But she still knew my father. And when my father would come to date her, he had a car. He was already 21 or something, and he would have to drive to the house and leave the car there, and they'd have to walk because it was on Madison Street. There were all the different theaters, the Madison Street Theater and Palace Theater and stuff. So they had to leave the house there and walk. They couldn't be in a car alone.
Now, was your grandfather Michael? He was
Michael?
He was pretty wealthy, I guess.
No, he was a farmer, and he came here and he bought a house, and he was a bricklayer, and he built some of the big hotels that are now torn down downtown. He was a bricklayer. That's what he became over here. And like I said, he just encouraged his children to have an education. My father was an engineer. My one uncle's an architect.
Now, how did your father what kind of education did your father have?
My father went to high school, and then he went to a school, Washburn Technical School, which now I think became part of IIT. So he finished high school, took the course, and then went to Zenith Radio, and actually ended up being the head of their prototype department in engineering, where they made all the prototypes of all the TVs and radios that they
This
did.
would have been in the 1930s, then?
Yeah,
Late
late 30s, and then because I was born in 44, and they were married 6 years when I was born.
Was your dad in the service?
No, my father, because of his ulcers, whatever, couldn't go in the service. But his two brothers did, Eugene and Pete. Eugene was in the Air Force, and they were in England, as Pete was in England also. And my father stayed here, and his sister, of course, the girl, she went to secretarial school. She was a secretary.
Okay, let's go back to Josephine
Okay, and
and music.
Josephine, like I said, started playing the piano. Then my grandfather was active with this Madonna Ulio Society that they had, and they wanted building Mother Cabrini Church. And the Scalabrinian priests, of course, came here basically to deal with the Italian community, and they were doing fundraising. And my mother played the organ. And Sunday Mass, they had Mass at Granada Funeral Home, which was also on Sacramento down the street.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the pump organ here that she played in. And then eventually the church was built, and my mother became the organist of the church there. And then she lived on Adams, not in the neighborhood. And then when it was time for me to start school, I went to school there. And I used to go to church every morning with my mother to the first Mass. And the nuns were at the first Mass. And then after that, I would go to the convent for my breakfast with the nuns and stay there till it was time for school. And then I would go back to church and say goodbye to my mom and go to school. And then lunchtime, I'd go back with the nuns.
Your family was very church-oriented.
Very church-orientated. Missionary, Scalabrini.
Your father as well?
Well, he didn't have any choice anyway. Whatever it was, he was going to be. And my mother started, doing a lot of fundraisers and things. I was 6 when we were in an opera raising funds. I think it must have been for Mother Cabrini Church. I was at all the carnivals on Cicero Avenue.
What about her career with the opera,
Well,
her debut? Tell us in detail about
my
that.
mother was a student of Dino Bagali and Nicola Brardinelli then. And they were her voice coaches in the Fine Arts Building downtown. And then she did her debut under Nicola Brardinelli, and she was Gilda in Rigoletto. She was 18, very young age actually, to be performing that role in an opera at the Civic Opera House downtown. And she was in a number of other operas. And what happened, she was doing really well, and she actually had, and I don't have the backup on it, but she told me that when all these other singers were getting contracts with MGM, they actually had asked her if she'd be interested in a career in Hollywood singing. But she thought it really wasn't worth it to move from her family and uproot everybody. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, she basically stayed in the Chicago area. But she sang for a lot of groups, a lot of big organizations, a lot of solos and operas. And then she was very active with the Scalabrinians in the church. Mm-hmm. And Villa Scalabrini very much, and they did operas here. So she was a musical director for a lot of things and continued her singing career, but more in private. Like if the Sons of Italy had something, she sang for them and stuff.
When she might have been considered for that Hollywood contract, how old was she? Or was she married?
I was born, so it was in 44, so she must have been about 25-ish, I think, in that area. But she said when she looked at, because even here, we have pictures of her, and you have them, on roller skates and ironing her publicity pictures. You have to have a publicity agent, you have a manager, you have to have this. So whatever you make is going to everybody. Mm-hmm. And in Hollywood, it would have been worse. And she thought, and they didn't make a lot of money then, it's not like today. And she just didn't think it was worth it. And they have publicity. She could never roller skate in her life, never on roller skates. And she said they couldn't get her to stand up for anything to take the picture. And she never ironed in her life either. They were ironing homegirl, making an opera. So it went on. And because she was so involved in the Italian community, and my father was always there, and I was singing with her from the early age, and it just continued on. And she was at the Scalabrinians all her life.
Did your parents speak Italian?
Well, my mother spoke Italian fluently because of the opera, but my father spoke Sicilian, and my mother also spoke Sicilian. And my grandparents, all 4 of them, spoke Sicilian, and they did speak English. Because of business and working, they had to speak Michael and my other, like I said, my father's mother living in Iowa spoke English better than all of the rest of the Italian women who didn't have that opportunity and stayed in the little Italian community. Mm-hmm. But they spoke the dialect, which I can understand.
Okay. So, I mean, let's finish off on the broad outlines of your mother's career.
So she just did a more. Once she decided not to go to Hollywood, but like I said, she stayed active here. She stayed active with the church. She put on operas for the Scalabrinians and stuff like that. We had a choir. We had a choir that sang like basically at festivals and stuff.
Was this before the Italian Cultural Center?
Was way before the Italian Cultural Center. Was before Villa Scalabrini, because this was all fundraising for Villa Scalabrini. I was there on the stage with her. I remember my feet were very dusty because that place on Cicero Avenue didn't have grass. It had dirty feet.
Okay, so and most of the fundraising for the seminary, or
Well, Villa
what?
Scalabrini, she was here for the opening of the seminary, though, in 1933. And because of her being involved with all the Scalabrinian priests, she was involved in the whole Scalabrinian everything. I mean, we knew all of them. I knew every priest. And I used to have operas here on the pavilion when I was young that I went to. There must be some history of it around here.
Full dress?
Yeah, operas. The priest, I can't remember what his name was. Father Fetcher would know, I think. I'll get his name. But he used to put on operas and dinners and stuff. A lot of people here. And I was active with the seminary when they built the seminary, and Father Cozy. And then I got involved eventually when I was about 20, when the Cultural Center started. Prior to that, I was involved at Our Lady of Mount Carmel because they have the big feast there. So I was involved with the feast committee and doing stuff there and singing for that feast.
So, your mother was active with, well, she did her opera career. Then she ended that and started working with the churches and with the Scalabrini community, was around to help support the seminary, and then when the Villa Scalabrini fundraising began, she got involved with that.
Yeah. I mean, she started with for Mother Cabrini, fundraising also first, and then Villa Scalabrini came later.
Okay. And what about the involvement with the Italian Cultural Center, your mother?
Well, my mother, when it started, of course, knew Father Feccia because he's a Scalabrinian priest, so she knew him. Either he would come to Mount Carmel to say masses. Somehow, he talked to her about the Italian Cultural Center, and she said to me, they're starting this Italian Cultural Center and they need help, and I think you should probably go talk to Father Feccia. Well, anyone who knows Father Feccia knows that when you talk to Father Feccia, you have a full-time job for life. That's all it is.
You were
In my early
late
20s,
teens?
early 20s, 21-ish, 22-ish, and I just started getting involved in the Cultural Center. This was here already. They had this room, but we worked on the library. Upstairs was nothing but classrooms and stuff. There was absolutely nothing there. And I will tell you, I don't know if some people, I should say this or not, but we had a lot of problems starting the Cultural Center because every other Italian group was a little upset because they're very possessive of their town and their group. And all of a sudden, here comes Father Fetch in the Italian Cultural Center saying, we want you to come here, we want this to be your home, we want to do our... It didn't go over really well. It wasn't too well understood. So one of my projects was to go to the different groups to talk to them about the Italian Cultural Center. And the easiest way to do that was my mother had the Italian Cultural Center Singers and Dancers, which we started here right away, and we would volunteer to go sing for their dinners or their meetings or whatever. Well, once they get us singing, they got to listen to my talk. So I would tell them about the Cultural Center and what it was doing. We weren't in competition with you. We just want you to have a home so we can show our culture and our heritage, because they thought we were going to sign membership, take their members, do this, which we didn't. My first experience with the Joint Civic Committee was really probably not the best, because, and Aunt Sorrentino was great. And she said, we have this folk festival. And Father Fetch had gone to Italy and bought tons of cameos and stuff and brought them back. I'm getting off base, though. I should really start with the fair. Can I switch back?
Yeah.
Okay. Fetcha went back to Italy for some meetings or whatever. And during the time there, before that, he got invited to be at the Iowa State Fair. It was dedicated to Christopher Columbus, and that was probably in 1971. And he went and bought all these cameos and all this stuff to sell at this fair that we didn't know. And he came here and had this room upstairs, the gallery, just filled with boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff that we had to box, organize, inventory to sell in Iowa.
Do you have any of those
Uh,
cameos?
I don't know. And since it was dedicated to Christopher Columbus, we also had to have an exhibit for Christopher Columbus. And somewhere in this museum or gallery that are hidden away is an entire life of Christopher Columbus that I cut mats for and framed every picture there with my arm, and because I had torn tendons, with my arm in a removable cast. So I went to a gallery guy he knew and did all the printing. We had this beautiful exhibit on Christopher Columbus in Italians, and Lucio Savoia was there with his model of Venice, as I said to you, and 2 weeks in the heat. And then we came back, and the Joint Civic Committee then had in, I think it was November, that folk fair, and they invited us to come, and Fetchy had all these jewelry to sell, and then they had to have a culture exhibit, which wasn't really the greatest. So basically, I volunteered to do the cultural exhibit, and I think that's when I got John Bucci and conned him into coming in with me and helping me set it up. So we did the folk fair, and we had all these cameos, and we had a table like this, and some of the Mrs. Tognati and some of these people had been there forever when the Joint Civic Committee was started. Marie was nice. It was Ann Sorrentino's to come here, and they'd say, "I've always stood in this spot. Why are you here?" And they were really upset about the Italian Cultural Center. So Ann Sorrentino, being as convinced as his father Feccia, decided I should join the Joint Civic Committee Italian Americans. And of course, I became one of their vice presidents. So the next year, I was pretty accepted by everybody because I was a vice president. How could they throw me out? The Italian Cultural Center. And then they became more and more interested. But at first, it was a hard pull even with them. I mean, Ann Sorrentino, her husband, were here, and some of the others, but a lot of people were not that you know what I mean? It took a long time to get all the people here. And I set up a traveling exhibit of extra stuff we had here. It might still be upstairs, some of it. And I would just go to their organizations and libraries and schools and talk to people about the Italian community, the Italian culture. Sometimes I'd leave an exhibit there for a week or two and pick it up. Because it's the only thing, you have to tell people what we are. Mm-hmm. And you can't do it. The only way is to be there and actually present it, I think. It worked that way. But hearing about us didn't work that easily.
And, well, let's backtrack a little bit to your development. Your mother was going from place to place, taking you along, and you were going to school. And tell us about your experience in school and possibly as it relates to your Italian identity.
Well, I was at Mother Cabrini School, and as I said, I was basically with the nuns. Fourth grade, they decided I could actually eat lunch in the lunchroom with all the rest of the kids. Up till that time, I had breakfast and lunch with the nuns. If my mother couldn't pick me up from school, my grandfather would after work, so I was at the convent. I said my evening prayers, 4 o'clock prayers in Italian. Mm-hmm. I went to Italian Mass every day. All our Masses were in Italian, so I'd listened to Italian my entire life. And just involved in the community. I was in Mission Sunday. I thought I had the picture. I forgot the pictures, but I have myself dressed up as a nun from Mother Cabrini for this one particular Mission Sunday. We all went to Holy Name Cathedral to be nuns and represent our orders. And pretty much they thought I was going to be a nun. It was my vocation. We used to go on vacation, day trips with the nuns, Starved Rock, all over. I spent my life with the convent, but I've always. They're people, everybody, nuns not going, hey, they sit and laugh and tell jokes, and they're really a good bunch of people. You have to live with them to know that. They're not as stern as you think. And then after fourth grade, my mother really got injured. She fell and she could have died, but she didn't. But she hit her head and she had a really bad thing. So I then went to school where we lived at St. Mel Holy Ghost School, but I still remained active because I sang in the choir my entire life. You know, I was always in the Italian community. They had a club for teenagers, so when I was 8th grade, I was at the only American in Italian club at Mother Cabrini. That was interesting. So, I mean, my whole life has been, I'm Italian. What can I say?
What was this Italian club all about?
They had something at Mother Cabrini, because I was like 13, and it was just a get-together for the young Italians. Because we had a lot of boys and girls, because we had a lot of young Italians, some newly arrived 18-year-old guys, 19, and they felt it was good for them to meet each other and meet and have picnics. We had picnics here in the grounds and stuff. So, it went on until really when the church closed, and they were going to it went down, and then my mother went to Mount Carmel to be organist.
When did the church close?
I don't remember the exact date. I was in high school. I was still singing in the choir at Mother Cabrini, so it had to be when I was in college.
Tell me about your high school experience.
I went to Nazareth Academy and was just a regular high school girl. You know,
what's the name?
Nazareth here in LaGrange Park.
Oh, okay. So you had moved.
We moved to Berwyn. When I was 12, my mother decided the neighborhood was changing on Adams Street there in Crawford, and so she decided to move out to the suburbs. So she bought a house in Berwyn. So we had a big house in Berwyn on the corner, and moved all our marble statues and antiques, good portion that are here, into that house, and commuted. I went then back to Mother Cabrini for 8th grade, and I didn't want to leave with my mom in the morning, so I took the bus in front of the house to the L, got off on Sacramento, and walked to Mother Cabrini School. And my brother came with me. He was in 4th grade, and he then did graduate from St. Francis Cabrini School. So I spent a couple of years not there, but most of the time I was
So you
there.
went to Catholic high school.
Went to Catholic high school, and then I went to Loyola University. My mother wanted me to sing, of course. I sang all over with her, and I was actually singing by myself at different functions. And I decided to major in psychology, not sing. Well, I did sing with her. I sang all my life. And then I ended up, because I'd been at Catholic school my entire life and never had any Old Testament studies. So I decided to take some studies in the Old Testament. So I actually have a psychology major and a minor in theology. So I could, be a deacon.
You could be a priest.
I could be, well, Father Corbellini used to tease me about it. He said, "Can't we make you the first priest of our order?" So I've been involved with the church my entire life. We had the chorus. We sang all over. We sang in Bettendorf, Iowa, in Indiana. We traveled. I mean, not only we sang here, I used to borrow Solosy Edelson's vans. And it was a weekend, he didn't need them for his customers. And we'd take his big vans and pack everything up in all our organ and equipment and on the road for the weekend.
Well, this would have been in almost 50s, 60s,
70s. We did the choir singing all over. Because we sang for the bicentennial with Paul Cianninolo, that bicentennial here, which was another exhibit that tried to kill me.
What level of identification with the Italianness was there among the Italian Americans?
I think our Italian Americans knew they were Italian American. And my family was kind of stranger than a lot of them because they made my brother and I know we were Italian American and going to be involved, which we always were. And that passed on actually to my children who think they're all Italian, and my grandchildren. So, I mean, my Italian heritage has stuck more than I think a lot of people. I feel sad. I think the Italian camp here was fantastic. The kids came here the summer before we went to Italy, so they all were in Italian camp. And, I mean, they just identify even though they may not be 100% Italian, that they're Italian.
And you think
And that came from my
what
mother.
impact do you think the Italian Cultural Center has had on identity for the Italian American community?
You know, I can take it from my family. I don't know how many other people, because it used to upset me, and I won't mention names, who are very active in our Italian community, like my parents' age. Oh, we can't get our children to come there. They're not interested in this thing. Well, it's their fault if they're not interested in this thing. Don't you think? I mean, like your kids know what they're going, what it is, Italian, because we spent our life sitting in under tents being Italian and telling people about Italy. And if the parents don't do that, and I'm sure your parents did that to you, you know, but you knew you were Italian. So, I mean, you have to let people know their heritage. I mean, they're American, but they definitely identify with Italy. And I think that a lot of children there, some do, some don't. And it's the family thing and how committed you are to it. That you want to continue your language, you want to continue your culture. I mean, my granddaughter Olivia can give a tour that she did when she's studying Italian here. And somebody was telling me about some girl that was in class and she gave a tour of the cultural center. I said, my granddaughter.
It's in the blood. It's in the blood.
A matter of fact, her goal, she's going to be a singer, but she wants to come here and manage the Italian Cultural Center.
Well, we need
So
new
we have
blood.
a 16-year-old that wants to come and take over.
That's good. Before we go on, anything particular that you remember from your Loyola experience? Did you live on campus?
No, I lived at home. I wasn't allowed.
Uh-huh.
Italian girl isn't going to live on campus.
So you had to go from Berwyn?
I wasn't at the downtown campus, though. I was at downtown campus. And actually, I spent the summer, I spent one summer modeling for Patricia Stevens Modeling School, which I didn't like. And then I got a job at the McVickers Theater. And so I worked as a usherette. Then I was a manager of all the usherettes and all that. And then I became actually a manager of the McVickers Theater downtown on Madison there, so, which is no longer there, but that was my career. From psychology major and theology, I ended up in a theater. Not on the stage like my mother thought.
Okay.
While I was still coming here volunteering.
Now, what organizations was your father active in?
My father was really not active in any of them. He was just involved with whatever my mother went to. He was not active. My grandfather had his Sicilian society. We went to all the dinners. They used to have the feast day. They used to have make beef sandwiches and stuff. It was a casual little thing. Dance
It was
mazurkas.
Madonna del Olio?
Madonna dell'Olio, which comes from Baffi, Sicily, province of Petrolio Soprano. I have a picture on my phone I showed you the other day. And that was basically what we were involved in until the cultural center, the church and the society. And
Would you say your father was more Americanized than your mother?
I think he was more Americanized, yes. And his whole family was more Americanized than my mother's family. Probably because the fact that they were in Iowa originally made them that way. And then they came here. And my paternal grandfather weren't that involved in the community, you know, so they weren't as much. So because my first cousins aren't, I mean, they know they're Italian. As a matter of fact, I had a second cousin call me because he said, I want to know what's going on with our family, searching down history and stuff. So I sent him all kinds of stuff, which I'm going to make copies of for you. My aunt wrote the whole history of the La Puma family.
Oh, yeah.
So I have that all written down
We'd love to have
for
that.
you. So I have to make a copy for you. And I have a number of things that I have to,
Yeah, that could
give
help
you.
in creating a book.
yeah. And I have other memorabilia from my mother. I have, like I said, my grandfather. I have his insurance, car insurance for $12.50 a year. His car.
That's amazing.
A lot of stuff.
So you're a young college graduate working at the McVickers Theater, manager,
Yeah.
and you were, what, in your early 20s?
My early 20s. I worked there till I was actually 24. And then I met my husband Hargrove, not Italian.
How did you meet Hargrove? What's the story there?
It's a strange story. I was working and living at home because you had to live at home, and my mother had a Cadillac. They always had Cadillacs, and I decided to buy a car, and that's what I wanted to buy was a Cadillac. So I marched down on Rush Street. There was a dealer, and walked in the store and said to the salesman, he says, "Are you looking for something? Are you lost?" And I kind of looked at him and said, "I want a car. Why would I come in here?" And he's going, "You're a customer. I don't have customers like you." And he kept trying to date me. He was, come on. And so he was talking about cars, and I couldn't figure the color. And he said, "Let's go across to Suka's and have a drink." So I said, "Oh, fine." So he was just introducing me to the world of Sukaza across the street. Or maybe it was Pizzeria Uno, it was. Pizzeria Uno.
I remember that.
As his new customer. Look she's my customer. She's my customer. She's my customer. And I met a ton of people. And I left. Goodbye, I'm going home. And I drove home. So he kept saying, and I had 2 wisdom teeth pulled, so I never went to buy the car a couple of days. I was supposed to come back. So he kept calling me, and I said, "Oh, I can't come. So Hargrove was there, and he said to him, "I really like that girl you introduced me to. Did she buy the car?" He said, "No, she's always giving me an excuse." And he says, "Well, let me talk to her, and I'll make sure she buys the car."
So you met Hargrove at the pizzeria?
But I didn't remember meeting him. That's the best part. So the salesman calls me and says, "I want you to talk to Hargrove Turner. He's a good friend of mine." And I talked to him, and he wanted my number. And I said, "No." I said, "When I come down to buy the car, I'll have him call you. I'll have Don call you that I'm coming down and I'll meet you." He hangs, "Thank you. That's wonderful. I'm so happy. Thank you." And he says to the salesman, "She said you could give me her phone number." So then the next day, he called me every day. So I met him. He came to my house. I had no idea who I was dating. That was November 8th. By Thanksgiving, everybody figured we're getting married. We were engaged for Christmas, and our wedding was March 8th. So it was a very fast romance. And he was a Welsh man, English.
And he lived...
He lived on Lakeshore Drive. His office was in Cicero, down the street from where my parents lived. And actually, if you look in the Italians in Chicago edition of the Chicago Tribune, and somewhere it's framed, is the whole history of my family and how I met Hargrove. And the whole thing is there. It's in a newspaper article. And my grandparents, too, my grandfather.
Oh.
Okay, so that's how I met Hargrove. And the Tribune asked my mother, "Well, how did you feel when your daughter comes home and says all the Italians she's met and been around and says, 'I'm going to marry Hargrove Turner'?" And my mother said, "I sat down and cried." And she did. But he said, "But he's okay now." And they asked him, "What do you think about being in this Italian family?" He says, "At first it's really strange," he said, "but after a while you really like it."
So was he wealthy?
No, he owned a Mid-American Bible Company in Cicero and CPD, but the photography company did like the Our Lady of Mount Carmel book and all that.
Yeah.
And he had salesmen all over the United States and stuff. So actually what happened is for our wedding, he bought me the Cadillac.
Oh.
Because the salesman said, "You said she's buying the Cadillac." So I got a white Cadillac for my wedding.
Okay, and then you went to live...
I went to live at Lakeshore Drive first with him, and then we bought a house in Westchester on Bellevue. And we lived on the house in Bellevue, and we had 2 children. Joseph, named after my father, and then Francesca, named after my grandmother, Turner. And they were Italianettes, and they danced. We have they were in the Christmas program with Marilyn Fredericks. They were Italian from start.
So you continued to do all the...
We continued to do everything,
Italian
and
stuff.
Hargrove came along with it. He just went with the flow, whatever happened. So, and unfortunately, Hargrove died when my children were 6 and 8 of cancer. But, and my parents were there, and my grandmother, so the Italian stayed. So they've been very involved from babyhood. And then I married Patrick Greco. They owned the Odeum. And we had a baby, Patrick Jr., who's now 37, the baby.
Oh, wow.
And so we've been involved in Emil, who was a good friend of my father's. He was actually my father's
Emo
intern.
Greco?
Emil Greco, who built the Odeum, was and has Pep Industries, which does builds Catholic churches, a lot of churches. Was his parents and my mother's parents were good friends, so just went on for years. What can I say? So that's how I ended up with 3 Italian children. Next step.
Okay.
And I was active at the cultural center through the entire time. My entire time with Hargrove, we had the bicentennial here, and Father Fetcher thought we should do something for the bicentennial. And I thought that was a good idea. And between the two of us, there were a little craziness, and we had Bucci. So you had 3 crazy people putting together a bicentennial celebration. That took night and day. I would bring my children here. They were little. I didn't have Patrick yet, but they would be here helping me, and they'd be in the office with Teresa if my grandmother or mother couldn't take care of them. And we had all of the antiques. We had jewelry from Queen Eleanor, Mr. Marcucci, who owned the Holiday Inn and the bank, Bellevue Bank, I think it was, had Etruscan urns that Bucci had me burying in sand. We got styrofoam columns and put them in there to make it look like ruins. And he brought all these Etruscan urns in a box. And the thought was we're going to make it look like the ruins, or, real. We put plexiglass in front of it, though. And I'm holding this pot in my hand with the shovel. And I said to Marcucci, this is really fantastic. It's so antique and beautiful. I said, is this insured? And he said, insured? You cannot insure. The sister to that was just bought by New York Metropolitan Museum for $1 million. And I'm sitting here. So that's one of my experiences. And we had a beautiful art exhibit. We had DePrado's wife. We had an exhibit all her fantastic Italian jewelry that she had. We had Italian furniture exhibit up on the top floor with all Italian furniture. And we had an exhibit by Colonel Cesare of all his paintings. Caravaggio's, everyone Van Gogh's. He had a magnificent collection of Italian art, which he loaned to us. He lived on downtown on the Gold Coast. And my mother with her station wagon, Bucci with his big van, and I went to pick up a few paintings. And Cesare kept adding this and adding that. And we had an armed guard standing outside his apartment as we loaded this van, okay? So then we have to drive to the Italian Cultural Center. So we're in the Cultural Center, Bucci and I, and then my mother's behind us. And I'm going like, oh my God, we have millions of dollars of paintings with us. Are we crazy? And we get to the Cultural Center, and we unloaded it and fetch us here. Everybody left and said, Leonora, watch this. And I'm like, oh. So basically we called the mayor of Stone Park, was Italian at that time, and I said, I have a little problem here. Maybe we could have somebody helping. And they had a guard every 5 minutes run around the circle for me.
That was 1976.
Yeah, 1976.
Where did the money come from? How did you get the money to
You know what?
all that
We
activity?
really didn't. We volunteered. We worked for free. We painted stuff, gets material, like in the room where the gallery is, there was horrible walls. The Ferrara family and my family put drapes and wood alongside and stapled it all up and hung paintings up on it. They were all volunteers. I'm talking, we were at night. My son Joe, Francesca was 3. She had to pick up the big pieces of wood and put them in the big container for the thing. We worked, my mother, all of us worked free. And whatever he needed, we'd find. Mm-hmm. You need paint,
now, there wasn't
whatever.
Grant money?
There was no grant. There was nothing. There was us.
Mm-hmm.
And people we knew. People we knew, and Bucci, I mean, he had all the plexiglass and stuff.
Now, as I recall...
And there's a magazine about that, too, here somewhere from the Tribune.
Okay.
I hope.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the archives.
Yeah.
What was the atmosphere like in the 70s in the Italian Cultural Center?
We had a lot of really nice time. I mean, everybody was happy to be here. Dario was here with his wife and his family. Everybody was helping out, volunteering for this and volunteering for that. We had just had a nice group of people here who were mostly were Italians from
Rather
Italy.
than Italian American.
There weren't too many. I was probably, I mean, my parents kind of associate with being Italian, my mother particularly, because she didn't speak English till she went to school. But basically, I was the Italian-American symbol here. Not too many other, Ribaldo, Spampanato. We're all basically Italians.
And these were new immigrants, and they were artistic.
They weren't all very artistic, but when you Father Fetch, you had to be artistic. I mean, you know, if somebody tells you we have to put these paintings up, or you have to paint this or that, or do whatever, everybody did what we had to do. I don't know if maybe Joe Bruno was artistic. We had Joe and Mima. We had everybody was here. Father Corbellini had his little office in the back. So I mean, we did. I don't know how we did it. Honest to God, we had that program, Gino and Maria Nuccio with the plays. We had in the gym here every week. Every week we had a play, we had a concert, we had something going on here. If you have the schedule, it's like an impossible schedule that we could do. I bet if we tried it today, we'd never have it done. The stuff that we did here, you know. And then I mean, it was just I just came to everything and worked. For my life, I guess, until I moved to Florida. When my daughter-in-law died 11 years ago is when I went to Florida to be recycled mom. And until that moment, I sang. I kept the choir going all over the place. I was here volunteering. Did it all.
Okay.
And my children, when I took, like from Spampanato, I took a sculpture class. We have my dad there.
You took a sculpture class.
From Mario Spampanato. That's why, look at my statue. That's my dad there. I did it.
What were the other classes that were being?
Ribaldo taught painting. Francesco taught painting in the room that's where St. Peter's is. And then in the other room, where he has that radio room and everything, we have a sculpture class. And I took sculpturing for a couple of years. I did my 2 children and my father.
A lot of students in the class.
Probably 10 students. Painting
were
had
they-
more a little bit.
They're more Italian. They're Italians.
Some Italian Americans, but Italian Americans, I think. I think they're more Italian Americans, but some Italians.
Do you remember
With Spampanato.
romances that were initiated here at the Italian Cultural Center?
I'm probably not going to say anything. Some things are better kept quiet.
There are a lot of people who were
They
new.
met here. A lot of people met here, and I'm sure that's why they're together. I mean, could be. I can't guarantee.
Well, they were new to the country,
Yeah.
and this was sort of a Italian-American island,
Right.
Italian island that they could come
Right,
to.
and we did have an
feel comfortable.
Italian group here because I was also in that, not speaking English, not being the Italian. I was the only American there too, but I went to that.
What was it?
It was an Italian group. He said it's young Italians. Fetcha knows because he was here. They had a group of Italian. I mean, Joe Bruno was in it. Dario Zanichelli was in it. That group.
How Catholic was it?
It's hard for me to say. I mean, my church experience basically was Mount Carmel, and some of the people were from Mount Carmel, and the people I knew were active there. I don't know. I mean, I think Joe Bruno is very Catholic, and the group that's San Francesco di Paolo group, the Calabrese group, is very devoted and Catholic to their things, and some are. Dario and his wife were involved and stuff. And some people I just didn't pay that much attention to how Catholic they were, but a lot of them were. I mean, our choir was made up of a lot of Italians.